接下来呢，我想我们来看一下这个影片。这个影片呢是在告诉我们，在娱乐的传统的娱乐的工具电视，它未来会有什么样的不同？那么传统的娱乐的这个工具，事实上好像慢慢的在沉下去。那么好像现在的大家看新闻也好，只要是年纪轻一点的，大部分都在网络上面去看。所以一样是这位Ian Pearson，他谈到电视未来的时候，他谈到了一些概念。这些概念，我希望大家可以仔细的去看。就像刚刚他在里头谈到这个 Sponge Network， 就是说未来的这个大家可以无线联网，并不是靠一个中央的系统，然后设了很多的发射站，而是靠很多很多的小发射站，大家互相连接达到的。同样的，他认为未来的电视根本就不会挂在墙上。那他认为所谓的电视就是在收视一个节目的一个工具，它未来不是挂在墙上，它挂在哪里？他举了很多很特别的例子。那么最特别的例子是，它就挂在你的眼睛里，你的隐形眼镜可能就是一台电视。那因为你的隐形眼镜是一台电视，或者是你的眼镜就是一台电视。那么你的眼镜或者隐形眼镜是一台电视的时候，你在看电视的时候，其实你也看到真实的世界。所以真实的世界跟电视的节目可以变成结合在一起，变成是一种新的东西。所以这个就是他在讲电视的未来非常不一样的东西。所以我们来看一下他在他的这个解释里面告诉我们什么。
There are lots of new kinds of devices coming along which will change the way that we interact with the world. The way we watch TV, the way we produce TV, and the way we distribute TV. All of these things are going to change dramatically in the next 10 or 20 years. Today we have big plasma and LCD TVs. They're going to be replaced quite soon by organic LED displays.
Organic LED display 就是有机的，我们现在是电浆电视，那 LED 的就是那种小的灯，非常低的这个用电量。那么有机的是什么意思？
Active contact lenses are taking tiny lasers and tiny micromirrors and sticking those into a contact lens with all of the TV reception circuitry to produce a laser beam straight onto your retina. Because you've got two inputs, you can make it 3D. You could overlay it on stuff you're looking at in the real world. We can miniaturize IT, we can make smaller laptops, smaller mobile phones. Ultimately, we get to the point where we can compress all of the IT that we own today into tiny little pieces of jewelry. The industry is really driven by the entrepreneurs deciding what consumers are probably going to want and recognizing what technologies out there are able to satisfy that.
他的意思是说，所有这些进步并不是来自于人类真正的需求。我们一般的消费者不会想到讲说啊，我想把电视装到我的眼睛里面去，然后让这些光直接打到我的视网膜，然后因为我有2个视网膜，所以一打进去的时候，从我的脑部我就可以看到是真正的3D， 那不是像看电视一样是看到一个平面。我们不会去想这个事情，但是这些创业家他去看到现在的科技，以及看到它有哪一些可能，所以他去做出来，然后告诉你说这个你要不要？你会觉得非常的这个受到吸引，所以你就要了。那这些未来的开发大概都是这个原因来的，并不是你有实际的这个需求。
not really the consumers driving this. Consumers don't really know exactly what they want. The entrepreneurs do. But ultimately, it's only in using the latest technologies that they can make that dream into a reality.
这一段影片很短，但是目的是告诉我们，电视这个我们非常熟悉的工具，将要随着科技的发展变成跑到我们的身上。那这个是对2020年的预测，所以到底跑到我们身上是不是真的在这个隐形眼镜里面，不知道。就像我说的，不要去预测它的形式，不要去预测它的这个样貌，你要预测的是它的趋势。那个趋势是什么？我们从刚刚前面一路听过来，24小时每一个礼拜7天的联网，再加上我们可以跟全世界各地的人合作，然后再加上现在已经有那么多人的这个玩游戏，那些力量可以发展，所以再加上电视这样的一个工具，可以越缩越小，越缩越小，小到能力上它已经可以跑到我们的眼睛里面去。那么这样子的一个世界，就是未来10年到20年我们所要面临的一个世界。所以各位同学，如果你负责在设计一个房子的时候，你在想象未来10年、20年，正是你的事业到达一个某种高度的时候，你现在需不需要去培养一些能力，能够解决这个新世界的新问题，而不是只是会解决老世界遗留下来的一些老问题，这个是很重要。那么我希望各位同学在这里能够去思考，这个是工具的演进，还是算是我们器官的一个演进？从人类没有电话变到有电话，我们人类远方的人跟我们说话本来我们是听不到的，我们只能够靠寄信把消息传过来。可是等到发明了电话以后，到底是工具变化了呢，还是因为透过这个工具，我们人类的耳朵这个器官变成一种新的演化？这个就是刚刚那位游戏的那位 game designer 他在说的一个重要的概念。人类透过玩游戏而让人类变成是一种新的品种，人类透过用电话而变成是一种新的品种。我们以前听不了那么远，有一个朋友在美国，我怎么可能跟他讲话？他怎么听得到我的声音？所以我变成是一个这个耳朵可以听到千里远的地方，我变成我的声音可以传千里的一个能力。所以这个从某个角度上来看，是一种器官的演化。那这种器官的演化，从电话变到电视，变到网络，现在变到这些器具可以因为奈米技术等等其他的技术的发展，在材料科学上面有机化的发展，它可以跑到你的身体里面去，所以越来越像你的器官的一个进化。那这个你必须要真正去思考，我们在设计一栋建筑物的时候，有没有类似的发展的可能性？也就是说，房子是不是一定要是一栋房子？景观我们要怎么样设计，它才会有它的未来发展的能力？以及我们在设计产品的时候，我们要用什么样子的基本的文化跟设计跟生活的观察去看这些问题，这个都是透过所有这一次的这些11住行娱乐的影片呢，我希望大家能够真正的去思考，更为深度一点的思考，而不是只是表面上的一个这个面向上的了解。好，看完这一支影片以后，我们先做一个短暂的这个休息，我们再来进行下一个。 这一位是一个行销的专家，他帮过苹果电脑开始进入网络，他也帮微软开始这个进入网络。那么他的很多经验非常的丰富。那么因为他在大学念书的时候，网络刚刚开始形成。那么他的这个思考的方式呢，是利用这个从历史去看媒体、科技跟文化的未来。这一支影片你要听的时候，如果你对于网络跟科技的发展不是那么清楚，你可能要稍微仔细听一点。但是仔细听完以后，对你一点都没有坏处，因为你几乎是从它短短的10几分钟里面去了解了过去几十年的一个媒体跟科技文化的发展史。他在带领你从媒体的、科技的跟文化的发展史去看到未来可能怎么走，所以从过去看未来。
Well, good morning. You know, the computer and television both recently turned 60, and today I'd like to talk about their relationship. Despite their middle age, if you've been following the themes of this conference or the entertainment industry, it's pretty clear that one has been picking on the other. So it's about time that we talked about how the computer ambushed television, or why the invention of the atomic bomb unleashed forces that led to the writer's strike. And it's not just what these are doing to each other, but it's what the audience thinks that really frames this matter. To get a sense of this, and it's been a theme we've talked about all week, I recently talked to a bunch of tweeners. I wrote on cards, television, radio, MySpace, internet, PC, and I said, just arrange these from what's important to you and what's not, and then tell me why. Let's listen to what happens when they get to the portion of the discussion on television.
Well, I think it's important, but like not necessary, because you can do a lot of other stuff with your free time than watch programs.
Which is more fun, internet or TV?
Internet. I think one of the reasons we put computer before TV is because nowadays, like, we have TV shows on the computer.
Oh yeah.
And that you can download onto your iPod.
Would you like to be the president of a TV network?
I wouldn't like it.
It would be so stressful.
No.
How come?
Because they're gonna lose all their money eventually.
Like the stock market, it goes up and down and stuff. I think right now the computers would be at the top and everything would be kind of going down and stuff.
There's been an uneasy relationship between the TV business and the tech business really ever since they both turned about 30. We go through periods of enthrallment followed by reactions in boardrooms in the finance community best characterized as, what's the finance term? Pui. Let me give you an example of this. The year is 1976, and Warner buys Atari because video games are on the rise. The next year, they march forward and introduce Cube, the first interactive cable TV system, and the New York Times heralds this as telecommunications moving to the home, convergence, great things are happening. Everybody in the East Coast gets in the picture, Citicorp, Penny, RCA, all getting into this big vision. By the way, this is about when I enter the picture. I'm going to do a summer internship at Time Warner that summer. I'm all excited to work on convergence. And then the bottom falls out. It doesn't work out too well for them. They lose money. And I had a happy blush with convergence until kind of Warner basically has to liquidate the whole thing. That's when I leave graduate school, and I can't work in New York on kind of entertainment and technology because I have to be exiled to California, where the remaining jobs are, almost to the sea, to go to work for Apple Computer. Warner, of course, writes off more than $400 million. $400 million, which was real money back in the 70s. But they were onto something, and they got better at it. By the year 2000, the process was perfected. They merged with AOL, and in just 4 years, managed to shed about $200 billion of market capitalization.
这一段话，也许各位在财政跟经济上面，如果不是很熟悉的话，听起来有点枯燥，也有点不知道他在说什么。他的意思是他在 实习的时候，他在时代华纳，就是那时候的华纳做事。那华纳那时候买了一个公司，那么赔了很多钱，那么赔了70亿美金。在1970年代的时候，赔70亿美金是很多的。可是到了公元2000年，他跟 American Online 就是这个 AOL 结合的时候，到后来他的这个市值，就是这个整个市值增加到2000亿，所以赔了70亿变成2000亿，这个是一个电脑本身发展的一个不可想象的一种规模。所以最主要就是让大家知道，那个你在这个时候做的一个决定赔的钱，你所累积下来的力量，如果你没有断线，其实你到30年以后，它就变成是一个非常庞大的力量。
Showing that they'd actually mastered the art of applying Moore's law of successive miniaturization to their balance sheet. Now, I think that one reason that the media and the entertainment communities, or the media community, is driven so crazy by the tech community is that tech folks talk differently. You know, for 50 years we've talked about changing the world, about total transformation. For 50 years it's been about hopes and fears and promises of a better world. And I got to thinking, you know, who else talks that way? And the answer is pretty clearly, it's people in religion and in politics. And so I realized that actually the tech world is best understood not as a business cycle, but as a messianic movement. We promise something great, we evangelize it, we're going to change the world. It doesn't work out too well, and so we actually go back to the well and start all over again as the people in New York and LA look on in absolute morbid astonishment, but it's this irrational view of things that drives us on to the next thing. So what I'd like to ask is, if the computer is becoming a principal tool of media and entertainment, how did we get here? I mean, how did a machine that was built for accounting and artillery morph into media? Of course, the first computer was built just after World War II.
他刚刚的这句话也值得各位同学思考一下。他说，当时发明电脑的时候，绝对不是要拿来看新闻的。发明电脑的时候，是为了拿来做会计的计算、财务的计算，以及拿来军事上使用。所以，一个发明给军事上使用、一个会计上使用的东西，怎么到最后会变成是一个媒体的主流的工具呢？这个是什么道理？他从历史上去看这些原因。
World War II to solve military problems, but things got really interesting just a couple years later, 1949, with Whirlwind, built at MIT's Lincoln Lab. Jay Forrester was building this for the Navy, but you can't help but see that the creator of this machine had in mind a machine that might actually be a potential media star. So take a look at what happens when the foremost journalist of early television meets one of the foremost computer pioneers, and the computer begins to express itself.
It's a Whirlwind electronic computer. With considerable trepidation, we undertake to interview this new machine. Hello, New York. This is Cambridge. And this is the oscilloscope of the Whirlwind electronic computer. Would you like to try to use the machine? Yes, of course, but I have an idea, Miss Forster. Since this computer was made in conjunction with the Office of Naval Research, why don't we switch down to the Pentagon in Washington and let the Navy's research chief, Admiral Bolster, give Whirlwind the workout?
Well, Ed, this problem concerns the Navy's Viking rocket. This rocket goes up 135 miles into the sky. Now, at the standard rate of fuel consumption, I would like to see the computer trace the flight path of this rocket and see how it can determine at any instant, say at the end of 40 seconds, the amount of fuel remaining and the velocity at that instant.
Over on the left-hand side, you will notice fuel consumption decreasing as the rocket takes off. And on the right-hand side, there's a scale that shows the rocket velocity. The rocket position is shown by the trajectory that you're now looking at. And as it reaches the peak of its trajectory, the velocity, you will notice, has dropped off to a minimum. Then as the rocket starts down, velocity picks up again toward a maximum velocity when the rocket hits the ground. How's that? Well, how about that, Admiral?
Looks very good to me.
And before leaving, we would like to show you another kind of mathematical problem that some of the boys have worked out in their spare time in a less serious vein for Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Foster and the MIT lab.
You know, so much was worked out. The first real-time interaction, the video display, a pointing gun. It led to the microcomputer, but unfortunately, it was too pricey for the Navy. And all of this would have been lost if it weren't for a happy coincidence. Enter the atomic bomb. We're threatened by the greatest weapon ever. And
换句话说，苏联如果没有发明原子弹，美国的电脑的发展就会在那一刻停下来。所以，因为苏联发明了原子弹，美国被一逼，海军不做，空军就拿去做。空军拿去做以后，真正打仗没用上，所以所有的商业化就开始发展。
Ever, and knowing a good thing when it sees it, the Air Force decides it needs the biggest computer ever to protect us. They adapt Whirlwind to a massive air defense system, deploy it all across the frozen north, and spend nearly 3 times as much on this computer as was spent on the Manhattan Project building the A-bomb in the first place. Talk about a shot in the arm for the computer industry. And you can imagine that the Air Force became a pretty good salesman. Here's their marketing video.
In a mass raid, high-speed bombers could be in on us before we could determine their tracks. And then it would be too late to act. We cannot afford to take that chance. It is to meet this threat that the Air Force has been developing SAGE, the semi-automatic ground environment system, to strengthen our air defenses. This new computer, built to become the nerve center of a defense network, is able to perform all the complex mathematical problems involved in countering a mass enemy raid. It is provided with its own powerhouse, containing large diesel-driven generators, air conditioning equipment, and cooling towers required to cool the thousands of vacuum tubes in the computer.
You know, that one computer was huge. There's an interesting marketing lesson from it, which is basically when you market a product, you can either say this is going to be wonderful and make you feel better and enliven you, or there's one other marketing proposition, if you don't use our product, you'll die. This is a really good example of that. This had the first pointing device. It was distributed, so it worked out distributed computing and modems, so all these things could talk to each other. About 20% of all the nation programmers were wrapped up in this thing, and it led to an awful lot of what we have today. It also used vacuum tubes. You saw how huge it was. And to give you a sense for this, because we've talked a lot about Moore's Law and making things small at this conference.
这一段你可以仔细听一下，那一台电脑能够做的运算的能力。如果把它拿来跟一个现在我们在用的这种电脑能够做的运算的能力，你看那台电脑要有多大
Let's talk about making things large. If we took Whirlwind and put it in a place that you all know, say Century City, it would fit beautifully. You kind of have to take Century City out, but it could fit in there. But like, let's imagine we took the latest Pentium processor, the latest Core 2 Extreme, which is a 4-core processor that Intel's working on. It'll be our laptop tomorrow. To build that, what we'd do with Whirlwind technology is we'd have to take up roughly from the 10 to Mulholland and from the 405 to La Cienega just with those Whirlwinds, and then the 92 nuclear power plants that it would take to provide the power would fill out the rest of Los Angeles. That's roughly a third more nuclear power than all of France creates. So the next time they tell you they're onto something, clearly they're not. So, and we haven't even worked out the cooling needs. But it gives you the kind of power that people have, that the audience has.
听懂吗？我们现在手提电脑的这样子的计算能力，如果用当时的电脑来做，那一部电脑要在美国加州那么大的一个地方，占据了那么大的地方，把它都摆满了以外。它需要用那么多的核能电厂所发出来的电，它可以发给整个加州用的电，拿来专门给它用，才是我们现在手上的一部电脑。所以你就可以看到，那个时候叫做1940年代，现在50年前，50年前跟现在差了这么远，所以我们常常在想说，那未来会有很大的改变吗？会。
Audience has, and the reason these transformations happening. All of this stuff starts moving into industry. DEC kind of reduces all this and makes the first mini computer. It shows up at places like MIT, and then a mutation happens. Space War is built, the first computer game, and all of a sudden, interactivity and involvement and passion is worked out. Actually, many MI2 students stayed up all night long working on this thing, and many of the principles of gaming today were worked out. DEC knew a good thing about wasting time. It shipped every one of its computers with that game. Meanwhile, as all of this is happening, by the mid-50s, the business model of traditional broadcasting and cinema has been busted completely. A new technology has confounded radio men and movie moguls, and they're quite certain that television is about to do them in. In fact, despair is in the air. And a quote that sounds largely reminiscent from everything I've been reading all week, RCA head David Sarnoff, who basically commercialized radio, said this: "I don't say that radio networks must die. Every effort is being made and will continue to be made to find a new pattern, new selling arrangements, and new types of programs that may arrest the declining revenues. It may yet be possible to eke out a poor existence for radio, but I don't know how." And of course, as the computer industry develops interactively, producers in the emerging TV business actually hit on the same idea, and they fake it.
Boys and girls, I think you all know how to get your magic windows up on the sets. You just get them out, first of all, get your winky-dink kits out, get out your magic window and your erasing cloth and rub it like this. That's the way we get some of the magic into it, boys and girls. Then take it and put it right up against the screen of your own television set and rub it out from the center to the corners like this. Make sure you keep your magic crayons handy, your winky-dink crayons, and your erasing cloth, because you'll be using them during the show to draw like that. You all set? Okay, let's get right to the first story about Dusty Dan. Come on into the secret lab.
It was the dawn of interactive TV, and you may have noticed they wanted to sell you the winky-dink kits. Those are the winky-dink crayons. I know what you're saying. Pete, I could use any ordinary open-source crayon. Why do I have to buy theirs? I assure you that's not the case. Turns out they told us directly that these are the only crayons you should ever use with your winky-dink magic window. Other crayons may discolor or hurt the window. This proprietary principle of vendor lock-in would go on to be perfected with great success as one of the enduring principles of windowing systems everywhere. It led to lawsuits, federal investigations, and lots of repercussions, and that's a scandal we won't discuss today. But we will discuss this scandal, because this man, Jack Barry, the host of Winky Dink, went on to become the host of 21, one of the most important quiz shows ever, and it was rigged and it became unraveled when this man, Charles Van Doren, was outed after an unnatural winning streak, ending Barry's career, and actually ending the career of a lot of people at CBS. It turns out there was a lot to learn about how this new medium worked. And 50 years ago, if you'd been at a meeting like this and were trying to understand the media, there was one prophet and only but one you wanted to hear from, Professor Marshall McLuhan. He actually understood something about a theme that we've been discussing all week.
我第一次晓得有这一位人物的时候就在东海上课，那个时候汉堡的老师教我说，虽然我们是学建筑的人，但是我们必须要去了解 McLuhan 在讲什么话。坦白说，那时候他教我们的一些有关 McLuhan 的这个理论，我们并不是非常的了解，我们只听懂了一个叫做 media is a message 这样这一句简单的话。那么现在在这么久以后，重新来看 McLuhan 他在所说的一些事情，他确实是比他的时代早了非常非常的多。他在所说的一些理论，其实现在差不多到了一个实现的时候。
It's the role of the audience in an era of pervasive electronic communications. Here he is talking from the 1960s.
If the audience can become involved in the actual process of making the ad, then it's happy. It's like the old quiz shows. They were great TV because it gave the audience a role, something to do. They were horrified when they discovered they'd really been left out all the time because the shows are rigged. Now, this is a horrible misunderstanding of TV on the part of the programmers.
You know, McLuhan talked about the global village. If you substitute the word blogosphere, the internet today, it is very true that his understanding is probably very enlightening now. Let's listen to him.
The global village is a world in which you don't necessarily have harmony. You have extreme concern with everybody else's business and much involvement in everybody else's life. It's a sort of Ann Landers column writ large. And it doesn't necessarily mean harmony and peace and quiet, but it does mean huge involvement in everybody else's affairs. And so the global village is as big as the planet and as small as the village post office.
We'll talk a little bit more about him later. We're now right into the 1960s. It's the era of big business and data centers for computing, but all that was about to change. You know, the expression of technology reflects the people and the time of the culture it was built in. And when I say that code expresses our hopes and aspirations, it's not just a joke about messianism, it's actually what we do. But for this part of the story, I'd actually like to throw it to America's leading technology correspondent, John Markoff.
Do you want to know what the counterculture and drugs, sex, rock and roll, and the anti-war movement had to do with computing? Everything. It all happened within 5 miles of where I'm standing at Stanford University between 1960 and 1975. In the midst of revolution in the streets and rock and roll concerts in the parks, a group of researchers led by people like John McCarthy, a computer scientist at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab, and Doug Engelbart, a computer scientist at SRI, changed the world. Engelbart came out of a pretty dry engineering culture, but while he was beginning to do his work, all of this stuff was bubbling on the Mid-Peninsula. There was LSD leaking out of Kesey's Veterans Hospital experiments and other areas around the campus, and there was music literally in the streets. The Grateful Dead was playing in the pizza parlors. People were leaving to go back to the land. There was the Vietnam War, there was black liberation, there was women's liberation. This was a remarkable place at a remarkable time, and into that ferment came the microprocessor. I think it was that interaction that led to personal computing. They saw these tools that were controlled by the establishment as ones that could actually be liberated and put to use by these communities that they were trying to build.
他的意思是在个人电脑为什么会在那个时代出现？是因为那个时代除了科技上面电脑的这个 processor， 就是处理器可以变小以外，最重要的就是那个时代的思想。就是那个时代正在反越战，正在这个嬉皮，正在这个等等等等，所以那个时代的文化影响了那个时代的设计。
And most importantly, they had this ethos of sharing information. I think these ideas are difficult to understand because when you're trapped in one paradigm, the next paradigm is always like a science fiction universe. It makes no sense. The stories were so compelling that I decided to write a book about them. The title of the book is What the Dormouse Said, How the 60s Counterculture Shaped the Personal Computer Industry. The title is taken from the lyrics to a Jefferson Airplane song. The lyrics go, remember what the dormouse said, feed your head, feed your head, feed your head.
By this time, computing had kind of leapt into media territory, and in short order, much of what we're doing today was imagined in Cambridge and Silicon Valley. Here's the Architecture Machine Group, the predecessor of the Media Lab in 1981. Meanwhile, in California, we were trying to commercialize a lot of this stuff. HyperCard was the first program to introduce the public to hyperlinks, where you could randomly hook to any kind of picture or piece of text or data across a file system, and we had no way of explaining it. There was no metaphor. Was it a database, a prototyping tool, a scripting language? Heck, it was everything. So we ended up writing a marketing brochure where we asked a question about how the mind works, and we let our customers play the role of so many blind men filling out the elephant. A few years later, we then hit on the idea of explaining to people the secret of how do you get the content you want, the way you want it, and the easy way. Here's the Apple marketing video.
You'll be pleased to know, I'm sure, that there are several ways to create a HyperCard interactive video. The most involved method is to go ahead and produce your own video disc, as well as build your own HyperCard stacks. By far the simplest method is to buy a pre-made video disc and HyperCard stacks from a commercial supplier. The method we illustrate in this video uses a pre-made video disc but creates custom HyperCard stacks. This method allows you to use existing video disc materials in ways which suit your specific needs and interests.
I hope you realize how subversive that is. That's like a Dick Cheney speech. You think he's a nice balding guy, but he just declared war. On the content business, find the commercial stuff, mash it up, tell the story your way. Now, as long as we confine this to the education market and a personal matter between the computer and the file system, it's fine. But as you can see, it was about to leap out and upset Jack Valenti and a lot of other people. By the way, speaking of the filing system, it never occurred to us that these hyperlinks could go beyond a local area network. A few years later, Tim Berners-Lee worked that out. It became a killer app of links, and today, of course, we call that the World Wide Web. Now, not only was I instrumental in helping Apple miss the internet, but a couple years later, I helped Bill Gates do the same thing. The year is 1993, and he was working on a book, and I was working on a video to help him kind of explain where we were all heading and how to popularize all this. We were plenty aware that we were messing with media, and on the surface, it looks like we predicted a lot of the right things, but we also missed an awful lot. Let's take a look.
The pyramids, the Colosseum, the New York subway system, and TV dinners. Ancient and modern wonders of the man-made world all. Yet each pales to insignificance with the completion of that magnificent accomplishment of 21st century technology, the digital superhighway. Once it was only a dream of technoids and a few long-forgotten politicians. The digital highway arrived in America's living rooms late in the 20th century. Let us recall the pioneers who made this technical marvel possible. The digital highway would follow the rutted trail first blazed by Alexander Graham Bell. Though some were incredulous. The phone company. Stirred by the prospects of mass communication and making big bucks on advertising, David Sarnoff commercializes radio.
Never had scientists been put under such pressure and demand.
The medium introduced America to new products.
Say, Mom, Windows for radio means more enjoyment and greater ease of use for the whole family. Be sure to enjoy Windows for radio at home and at work.
In 1939, the Radio Corporation of America introduced television.
Never had scientists been put under such pressure and demand.
Eventually, the race to the future took on added momentum with the breakup of the telephone company. And further stimulus came with the deregulation of the cable television industry and the re-regulation of the cable television industry.
We did the work to build this cable industry. Now the broadcasters want some of our money. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Computers, once the unwieldy tools of accountants and other geeks, escaped the back rooms to enter the media fracas. The world and all its culture reduced to bits, the lingua franca of all media. And the forces of convergence exploded. Finally, four great industrial sectors combined: telecommunications, entertainment, computing, and everything else.
We'll see channels for the gourmet, and we'll see channels for the pet lover.
Next on the Gourmet Pet Channel, decorating birthday cakes for your schnauzer.
All of industry was in play as investors flocked to place their bets. At stake, the battle for you, the consumer, and the right to spend billions to send a flood of information into the parlors of America.
With an information highway across the USA, and everybody be shopping in a whole new way. the stuff on your TV and use your credit card. It's like having a strip mall in your own backyard. So catch an old movie, play a video game, watch Punch and Judy, it's all the same. But digital convergence can bring it all to you, and it must be progress, 'cause it's all brand new.
We missed a lot. You know, we missed the internet, the long tail, the role of the audience, open systems, social networks. It just goes to show how tough it is to come up with the right uses of media. Thomas Edison had the same problem. He wrote a list of what the phonograph might be good for when he invented it, and kind of only one of his ideas turned out to have been the right early idea. Well, you know where we're going on from here. We come into the era of the .com, the World Wide Web, and I don't need to tell you about that because we all went through that bubble together. But when we emerge from this in what we call Web 2.0, things actually are quite different. And I think it's the reason that the TV is so challenged. If Internet 1 was about pages, now it's about people. It's a customer. It's an audience. It's a person who's participating. It's the formidable thing that is changing entertainment now.
Because it gave the audience a role, something to do.
In my own company, Technorati, we see something like 67,000 blog posts an hour come in. That's about 2,700 fresh connective links across about 112 million blogs that are out there. And it's no wonder that as we head into the writer's strike, odd things happen. You know, it reminds me of that old saw in Hollywood that producers, anyone who knows a writer, I now think a network boss is anyone who has a cable modem. But it's not a joke. This is a real headline. Websites attract striking writers. Operators of sites like mydamnchannel.com could benefit from labor disputes. Meanwhile, you have the TV bloggers going out and strike in sympathy with the television writers. And then you have TV Guide, a Fox property, which is about to sponsor the online video awards, but cancels it out of sympathy with traditional television not appearing to gloat. To show you how schizophrenic this all is, here's the head of MySpace, or Fox Interactive, a News Corp company, being asked, well, with the writer's strike, isn't this going to hurt News Corp and help you online?
But yeah, I think there's an opportunity as the strike continues. There's an opportunity for more people to experience video on places like MySpace TV. And
oh, but then he remembers he works for Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, well, first, you know, I'm part of News Corporation as part of Fox Entertainment Group. Obviously, we hope that the strike the issues are resolved as quickly as possible.
One of the great things that's going on here is the globalization of content really is happening. Here's a clip from a video, from a piece of animation that was written by a writer in Hollywood. Animation worked out in Israel, farmed out to Croatia and India, and it's now an international series.
The following takes place between the minutes of 2:15 p.m. and 2:18 p.m. in the months preceding the presidential primaries. You'll have to stay here in the safe house until we get word the terrorist threat is over.
You mean we'll have to live here? Together? With her? Well, there goes the neighborhood.
The company that created this, Anaboom, is an interesting example of where this has had a traditional TV animation cost, say, between $80,000 and $10,000 a minute. They're producing things for between $1,500 and $800 a minute, and they're offering their creators 30% of the back end in a much more entrepreneurial manner. So it's a different model. What the entertainment business is struggling with, the world of brands is figuring out. For example, Nike now understands that Nike Plus is not just a device in its shoe, it's a network to hook its customers together. And the head of marketing at Nike says, people are coming to our site an average of 3 times a week. We don't have to go to them, which means television advertising is down 57% for Nike. Or as Nike's head of marketing says, we're not in the business of keeping media companies alive, we're in the business of connecting with consumers. And media companies realize the audience is important also. Here's an ad announcing the new Market Watch from Dow Jones, powered 100% by the user experience on the home page. User-generated content married up with traditional content. It turns out you have a bigger audience and more interest if you hook up with them. Or as Jeffrey Moore once told me, it's intellectual curiosity that's the trait that brands need in the age of the blogosphere. And I think this is beginning to happen in the entertainment business, One of my heroes is songwriter Allie Willis, who just wrote The Color Purple and has been an R&B rhythm and blues writer. And this is what she said about where songwriting's going.
With millions of collaborators, what is a song? Because to look at them strictly as fans is missing what this medium is about.
So to wrap up, I'd love to throw it back to Marshall McLuhan, who 40 years ago was dealing with audiences that were going through just as much change. And I think that today, traditional Hollywood and the writers are framing this perhaps in the way that it was being framed before. But I don't need to tell you this. Let's throw it back to him.
We are in the middle of a tremendous clash between the old and the new.
The medium does things to people, and they're always completely unaware of this. They don't really notice the new medium that is roughing them up. They think of the old medium because the old medium is always the content of the new medium, as movies tend to be the content of TV, and as books used to be the content, novels used to be the content of movies. And so every time a new medium arrives, the old medium is the content, and it is highly observable, highly noticeable. But the real roughing up and massaging is done by the new medium, and it is ignored.
I think it's a great time of enthrallment. There's been more raw DNA of communications and media thrown out there. Content is moving from shows to particles that are batted back and forth and part of social communications. And I think this is going to be a time of great renaissance and opportunity. And whereas television may have gotten beat up, what's getting built is a really exciting new form of communication. And we kind of have the merger of the two industries and a new way of thinking to look at it. Thanks very much.
对各位同学来说，这个是一个有点深的影片。不过就算是有点深，我想各位从刚刚的那个影片中间所听来的东西，多多少少会影响你未来对于一些事情的判断。就像我在这个各位的年纪的时候，同样在这个学校听到汉堡的老师教的 McLuhan， 就是刚刚的那位麦克鲁汉所介绍的这个从事设计的人要知道 media is a message。那汉先生那时候让我们要去思考的是说，建筑物就是一个媒体。那建筑物就是一个媒体，以我当时的年纪是不容易听懂的，但是我想办法去把它咀嚼，然后吞不下去，根本搞不清楚这是什么东西。我想各位会有差不多同样的心情，那也许各位的生活经验更丰富，接受的资讯更多，说不定可以消化得更快。但是无论如何，你大概从刚刚这一支看起来有点枯燥的影片，他在描述整个历史的时候，他真正最重要的事情是在描述一个食衣住行娱乐的这个娱乐产业，也就是很重要的媒体产业的一部分。这个娱乐产业正在过去的50年到40年是怎么样子走过来，它跟科技之间的影响是什么？然后它很明显的受到这个 IT 的科技的影响是什么？然后它在往前走去的时候，事实上它就是会往哪个方向去？在我们预测这个趋势的时候，我们大概可以从刚刚的第一支影片，那个指挥家从全世界不同的国家那么多的这个演唱者中间去组合成为一支合唱团开始，然后慢慢看到现在，我们从一个最明显的让我们可以感到一种娱乐正在改变，到娱乐正在改变的历史原因的分析来看这整段的这个娱乐跟媒体之间的关系跟科技的改变，大概先看到这里，我们休息10分钟，再接下来谈教育，谢谢。各位同学，我们准备继续啊。刚刚的这一支影片，确实是比较深了一些。那不过我想，就像我刚刚说的，深有深的好处，因为各位一定要养成一个好习惯。那个好习惯就是说，看不懂的东西，听不懂的东西，也让它在你的脑袋里面放进去。就算是放不进去，泡水， 也不错。就像我们还不会游泳的时候，先去接触一下水的感觉，我们对水就没有那么害怕。我举我的自己的一个例子，除了英文、中文、日文看得懂一些以外，意大利文我是绝对没有办法看懂。但是有很多意大利的杂志，它的设计杂志是非常非常好的。那么我在看意大利杂志的时候怎么看呢？当然看不懂，又不甘愿只看这个照片，所以就要想办法从字里面去凑一些似是而非的理解。但是这样子的好处是什么？其实跟我们在很多堂课里面讲到的脑神经的这个发展就可以了解。我们的脑基本上就是看越陌生的东西，我们的脑神经细胞的这个受到的刺激就越多，它越容易去连接一个本来它把这样子的道理，就是我们在认知上面这样子的东西是放在这里归纳，把那样的东西是放在另外一边归纳。如果我们去接触到一个我们不太认识的东西，他把我们认为属于这个的，他说成这个，或者是我们完全不知道要归纳在哪里，我们就会开始去寻找一些新的路，做脑神经细胞的连接。所以去听一些完全自己不明白的东西，最大的好处就是刺激我们的脑神经细胞变成比较的活跃，然后比较敢去思考一个对自己来讲是完全陌生的东西。这也是为什么我们在这个娱乐的前面几支非常容易看懂而且容易有感觉的东西之后，我们放了这样子的一个影片。